They laughed when she stepped onto the firing range. They laughed harder when she requested the Barrett M82A1.
Perfect hit.
But when the bullet crossed 300 meters and struck dead center, the entire base fell silent, and one general's jaw hit the ground. The Georgia sun hammered down on the concrete like a punishment from above. Heat waves shimmered off the tarmac, distorting the distant target range into a mirage of possibilities and failures. Staff Sergeant Marcus Holt stood with his arms crossed, aviator sunglasses reflecting the harsh light, watching as another batch of candidates filed onto the shooting platform. "Listen up," his voice cut through the humid air like a blade. "This is day 1 of advanced long-range marksmanship. Half of you won't make it past week 2. 3/4 won't graduate, and if you think you're here because you're special, you're not. You're here because someone thought you might be worth the ammunition." The candidates stood at attention. 23 men in desert camouflage, faces hard with determination, bodies sculpted by years of military conditioning. And one woman. Corporal Riley Ashford stood 5th from the left, 5'6" in her boots, lean but not fragile, with shoulder-length auburn hair pulled tight into a regulation bun. Her green eyes held steady on Sergeant Holt, refusing to blink despite the sweat running down her temple. She knew what was coming. She always knew. "Corporal Ashford," Holt called out, his tone somewhere between curiosity and contempt. "Step forward." Riley moved with precision, her boots clicking against the concrete in perfect rhythm. She stopped 2 paces in front of the instructor and saluted sharply. Holt didn't return it immediately. Instead, he walked a slow circle around her, like a predator assessing prey. The other candidates shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances. One smirked. "Ashford," Holt finally said, his voice carrying across the range. "What makes you think you belong here?" "Sir, I qualified top marksman in my battalion, sir." "So did everyone else here." He stopped directly in front of her, removing his sunglasses to reveal steel-gray eyes. "Let me rephrase. What makes you think you, specifically, can handle what's coming?" Riley's jaw tightened. She'd heard variations of this question her entire career, at basic training, at airborne school, at every goddamn checkpoint on her way to becoming something more than what people expected. "Sir, I don't think. I know, because I've already proven it." A low whistle came from somewhere in the line. Holt's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Interest, maybe, or calculation. "We'll see," he said quietly, then louder. "Everyone, 100-meter 0, move." The firing line was a symphony of controlled violence. 24 rifles, 24 breathing patterns, 24 hearts beating in rhythm with their triggers. Riley settled behind her M110 semi-automatic sniper system, cheek pressed against the stock, eye aligned with the scope. The 100-meter target looked almost insulting in its proximity. "On my command." Holt's voice crackled through the range speakers. 3 rounds, center mass, fire." The world narrowed to the reticle, the target, and the space between heartbeats. Riley exhaled halfway, held, and squeezed. The rifle kicked into her shoulder, once, twice, 3 times. Through the scope, she watched her rounds punch through the paper silhouette in a tight grouping that could be covered with a quarter. "Cease fire!" Riley engaged the safety and sat back, her pulse steady. Around her, other candidates were doing the same, some looking satisfied, others frustrated. To her right, a massive soldier with a shaved head and a tattoo of a scorpion on his forearm glanced at her target, then at his own. His rounds were good, clustered within 4 inches. Hers were better. "Not bad for a girl," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Riley didn't respond. She'd learned early that words meant nothing. Only results mattered. Holt walked the line, examining each target with a critical eye. He spent extra time at Riley's, measuring the grouping with a caliper. When he finished, he turned to address the group. "Acceptable. Most of you can hit a stationary target at close range. Congratulations. So can a moderately trained chimpanzee." Scattered nervous laughter. "Tomorrow we move to 300 meters with wind variables. Thursday, we're at 600 with moving targets. By next week, you'll be engaging at distances where gravity becomes your worst enemy. And by the end of this course, The ones who survive will be capable of taking shots that separate the snipers from the shooters. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the candidates before landing, deliberately, on Riley. Some of you are wondering if this course has ever graduated a woman. The answer is yes. 3, in the past 15 years. 2 washed out within 6 months of their first deployment. The third... He hesitated, something human crossing his face for the first time. The third is currently operating in a classified unit and has 17 confirmed kills in counterterrorism operations. She's also the reason I don't automatically assume women can't do this job. Riley felt the weight of every eye on the line. Some curious, some resentful, some calculating whether she'd be competition or cannon fodder. But, Holt continued, his voice hardening again, she was also twice as good as any man in her class. Not equal, better. Because equal doesn't cut it when you're fighting biology, tradition, and the expectations of every soldier who's ever held a rifle. So, Corporal Ashford, he stepped closer. I'm going to ask you one more time. What makes you think you're ready for this? Riley stood, meeting his gaze without flinching. Her voice was calm, measured, and absolutely certain. Sir, I'm not here to be equal. I'm here to be exceptional. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Then Holt's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Good. Because tomorrow I'm pairing you against Sergeant Drake for the 300-meter competition. He gestured toward the soldier with the scorpion tattoo. He holds the current course record. Let's see if your confidence is backed by capability. That evening, barracks B7. Riley sat on her bunk, disassembling and cleaning her rifle with methodical precision. The barracks were divided by gender. She had a small room to herself while the men shared the larger bay, but the walls were thin enough that she could hear their conversations. Think she'll last? Maybe. Did you see her grouping? Tight. Yeah, but 100 meters is nothing. Wait till the pressure's on. Holt's setting her up against Drake tomorrow. That's brutal. Drake's an asshole, but he can shoot. She's gonna get embarrassed. Riley's hands never stopped moving. Stock, bolt, barrel, magazine, each piece cleaned, inspected, reassembled. She'd heard it all before. Doubt, skepticism. The unspoken assumption that she was a diversity quota, a political statement, a feel-good story that would crumble under real pressure. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger brother, Mason, back home in rural Montana. How's day 1? Kick some ass yet? She smiled despite herself, typing back. Working on it. Miss you. Dad would be proud. Mom's lighting candles at church. Says she's praying you hit every target. Riley's throat tightened. Her father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Ashford, retired, had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old. Tin cans on fence posts, then clay pigeons, then long-range targets across the valley from their ranch. He'd never treated her differently than Mason, never suggested that guns were for boys. You've got the eye, he'd told her once, watching her punch a hole through a target at 400 yards. That's not something you learn. That's something you're born with. Don't let anyone tell you different. He'd died 2 years ago, heart attack, sudden and cruel. She'd been deployed in Iraq, coordinating convoy security when she got the call. By the time she made it home, he was already buried. She'd stood at his grave in her dress uniform, saluted, and made a promise. I'll make you proud. I'll go further than you ever could. A knock on her door pulled her back to the present. Yeah? The door opened, and a young soldier stepped in. Private First Class Chen, one of the course candidates. He looked nervous. Corporal, I just wanted to say your shooting today was impressive. Really clean grouping. Riley studied him for a moment. No sarcasm in his eyes, no hidden agenda, just genuine respect. Thanks, Chen. Yours wasn't bad either. He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I hope you kick Drake's ass tomorrow. Guy's been insufferable since he broke the record. After he left, Riley lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be the first real test. Not just of her skill, but of her right to be here. She'd faced skepticism before, but this was different. This was the elite tier, the place where reputations were forged or destroyed. She closed her eyes and visualized the shot. 300 meters, Wind from the southwest. Elevation adjustment. Breathing control. The moment between heartbeats when the world goes silent and nothing exists except you, the rifle, and the target. I'm ready, she thought. I've always been ready. Day 2, 0600 hours. The morning briefing was short and direct. Sergeant Holt stood before a whiteboard covered in ballistic calculations and weather data. 300-meter engagement, 5 rounds. Wind is gusting southwest at 12 to 15 miles per hour, with occasional spikes to 20. Temperature, 84 degrees and climbing. Humidity, 72%. Your scopes are already zeroed for this distance, but you'll need to account for wind drift and mirage effect. He turned to face the class. Ashford and Drake, you're up first. Everyone else will shoot after, but your scores will set the benchmark. High score gets range time on the 1,000-meter line this afternoon. Low score gets to clean the latrines for a week. Drake grinned, cracking his knuckles. He was built like a linebacker, 6'2", probably 220, with the kind of swagger that came from years of being the best at everything physical. Ready to go home, Corporal? He asked Riley as they walked to the line. Ready to shoot, she replied evenly. They took position side by side, weapons resting on sandbag supports, spotters assigned behind each of them. Riley's spotter was a grizzled sergeant first class named Odom, who'd been running the range for 8 years. Don't let him get in your head, Odom muttered. Just shoot your shot. Riley nodded, settling into her stance. Through the scope, the target looked small, a silhouette barely 18 inches wide. The wind flags along the range were dancing erratically, showing the gusts Holt had mentioned. Shooters ready, Holt's voice boomed. 5 rounds, best 3 count. On your command, shoot when ready. Drake fired first, a deliberate power move, his rifle's report echoing across the range. Riley waited, watching the wind flags, feeling the breeze on her face. 5 seconds, 10. The wind settled slightly. She fired. Through the scope, she saw the vapor trail, the bullet cutting through the heat shimmer, the impact splashing just right of center. Close, but not perfect. Wind pushed you, Odom said quietly. Compensate left. Half mil. Riley adjusted, exhaled, squeezed. The second round struck center mass. Beside her, Drake was firing rhythmically. Boom, 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 like a metronome. Confident. Fast. Maybe too fast. Riley took her time with rounds 3, 4, and 5. Each one required reading the wind, accounting for the mirage dancing across the desert floor, trusting her calculations more than her instincts. Cease fire! The targets were brought forward on automated tracks. Both shooters stood as Holt examined the results. Drake's target showed 5 hits, 4 in the chest area, 1 just outside the scoring zone. Solid shooting. His best 3 formed a grouping about 8 inches wide. Holt moved to Riley's target. Her 5 rounds were all within the silhouette. Her best 3 formed a grouping that measured 4.5 inches. The range went silent. Drake stared at the targets, his jaw working. Beginner's luck. Luck? Holt raised an eyebrow. Son, there's no luck at 300 meters in variable wind. There's skill or there's failure. Corporal Ashford just outshot you by a significant margin. One time, Drake said, his voice tight. Doesn't mean anything. Holt turned to address the entire class. Actually, it means she earns afternoon time on the 1,000-meter line. And you. He looked back at Drake. Get to clean latrines. Dismissed. That afternoon, 1,000-meter range. The landscape stretched out like a painting of desolation. Scrub brush, rocky outcrops, and heat shimmer that made everything beyond 500 meters look like it was underwater. At the far end, barely visible even through binoculars, stood a series of steel targets. Riley lay prone behind a Remington M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, the weapon's weight distributed across her body, her breathing slow and controlled. Beside her, Odom provided spotting data. Target is at 1,000 meters, wind 3 o'clock, 8 miles per hour steady. Pressure dropping, storm front moving in from the west. You've got maybe 30 minutes of stable conditions. Riley made mental calculations. At this distance, she'd need to account for bullet drop, approximately 400 inches, wind drift, roughly 40 inches, Coriolis effect, Minimal but present air density changes from the incoming weather. Ready when you are, Odom said. She looked through the scope, finding the target, a steel plate shaped like a torso, painted bright orange to catch the light. It looked impossibly small. At this distance, a human would be less than 2 inches tall in her field of view. This is where snipers are made, she thought, not at 100 meters, not even at 300. Here, where the margin for error is 0. She controlled her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, each exhale leaving her more settled, more centered. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, 4 pounds of pressure, smooth and gradual. Between heartbeats, she squeezed. The rifle roared. The scope jumped with recoil. For 2 full seconds, an eternity, nothing happened. Then the distant clang of metal on metal echoed back across the desert. "Hit!" Odom shouted. Dead center. Holy hell, Corporal, that was a first-round impact. Riley felt the adrenaline surge through her system, but she forced herself to remain calm. One shot proved nothing. Consistency was everything. Again, she said. 4 more rounds, 4 more impacts. The last one rang the steel so hard it spun on its mount. When they finished, Odom sat back on his heels, shaking his head. I've been spotting for 8 years. I've seen maybe a dozen shooters make first-round hits at 1,000 consistently. You just made 5 in a row. Riley safetied the rifle and sat up, her shoulder aching from the recoil. My father used to say that shooting isn't about strength, it's about patience, about waiting for the world to go quiet. Your father military? 22 years. Army infantry. He taught me everything. Odom nodded slowly. He taught you well. Drake's going to lose his mind when he hears about this. Let him, Riley said, standing and brushing dust from her uniform. I'm not here to compete with Drake. I'm here to master the craft. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. In a place like this, everything was competition. Every shot, every score, every moment you proved you belonged or proved you didn't. Week 2, Day 9. The course intensified, moving targets, nighttime shooting with thermal optics, rapid engagement drills where speed and accuracy had to coexist, urban environment scenarios where wind patterns swirled unpredictably between buildings. Riley excelled, not in every discipline. Her physical strength lagged behind the men during the ruck marches, and she struggled with the cold bore shot challenge. But her core skill remained undeniable. She could read wind better than anyone, and her fundamentals were flawless. Drake, meanwhile, grew increasingly hostile. He accidentally bumped her during a briefing, made snide comments just loud enough for others to hear, questioned her scores, suggesting to anyone who'd listened that Holt was going easy on her. Most of the other candidates ignored him. A few, including Chen and a stocky sergeant named Patterson, actively defended her. But the tension on the range grew thicker than the Georgia humidity. It came to a head on Day 12. The challenge. Listen up. Holt stood before the class, his expression grave. I've received authorization for a special demonstration. This Friday we're hosting a delegation from Special Operations Command and the Pentagon. They're evaluating whether to expand long-range precision capability across more units. To showcase what this course produces, I'm selecting one candidate to perform an extreme long-range shot, 2,500 meters, live fire, single round. The room went electric with tension. 2,500 meters, nearly a mile and a half, was the edge of even modern rifle capability. Factors like wind, air density, temperature, even the Earth's rotation became significant. The shooter will be selected based on cumulative performance through Week 2. Announcement tomorrow morning. That night, Riley couldn't sleep. She ran calculations in her head, visualized scenarios, remembered every lesson her father had taught her. At extreme distances, he'd said, you're not just shooting a rifle, you're conducting a negotiation with physics, and physics doesn't care about your feelings. Friday morning. The selection. Corporal Riley Ashford. The words hung in the morning air like a verdict. Drake's face went red. Bullshit. I've been shooting since I was 6 years old. I've made shots in Afghanistan that were impressive. Holt interrupted calmly. But Corporal Ashford has demonstrated superior fundamentals, better wind reading capability, and more consistent accuracy across all distances. This isn't about your experience, Sergeant. It's about performance. Drake looked ready to explode, but he bit back whatever he was about to say and stalked away. Riley felt the weight of dozens of eyes. The pressure wasn't just about making the shot. It was about justifying Holt's faith in her, proving to the skeptics that she wasn't a token and honoring the legacy of every woman who'd fought for a place in these ranks. "Sir," she said quietly, "I won't let you down." Holt's expression softened slightly. "I know. That's why I chose you." Friday, 1400 hours, extreme long-range platform. The observation platform was crowded with brass. 2 colonels, a brigadier general, several captains, and a civilian consultant from SOCOM's training division. They stood behind safety barriers, binoculars and spotting scopes trained on the distant target zone. Riley lay prone on the reinforced shooting platform. The Barrett M82A1 stretched out before her like a sleeping dragon. The rifle weighed 30 pounds, fired 50 BMG rounds, and was capable of punching through engine blocks at a mile. At 2,500 meters, it represented the absolute edge of what was possible. Odom crouched beside her with a laser rangefinder and weather station. Target confirmed at 2,487 meters. Wind is complicated. Ground level 8 miles per hour from the southeast. At target altitude, we're seeing 12 to 15 from the south. Pressure steady. Temperature 91 degrees. You've got 1 round, Corporal. Make it count. Riley studied the target through her scope. A steel plate 4 feet square, painted white, mounted on a hillside. At this distance, it appeared smaller than her thumbnail. The math was staggering. Bullet drop, over 1,000 inches flight time, approximately 4.5 seconds. Wind drift, potentially 100 plus inches. Coriolis effect, significant spin drift, nearly 20 inches. "This is insane," someone muttered from the observation platform. Holt's voice cut through. "Corporal Ashford, you are cleared to engage when ready." Riley blocked out everything. The watching eyes, the career implications, the gender politics, the pressure. She returned to the fundamentals, to her father's voice in her memory. The rifle doesn't know you're scared. The bullet doesn't care about expectations. Physics is neutral. Be neutral with it. She adjusted her scope. Elevation up 40 MOA. Windage right 6 MOA. Checked her breathing. Felt the trigger. 7 pounds of pressure on this rifle, heavier than she was used to. The wind flags along the range swayed hypnotically. She waited and waited. Then, for just a moment, they stilled. Now. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared like thunder, the recoil hammering into her shoulder, the muzzle blast kicking up dust in a cloud around the platform. Through the scope, she watched the vapor trail arc across the desert, a line drawn through space and time. 4 seconds, 4.5. The clang of impact echoed back across the valley. "Hit!" Odom screamed. "Dead center hit!" The observation platform erupted. Officers were shouting, scrambling for binoculars, confirming what seemed impossible. Riley safetied the rifle and sat up slowly, her ears ringing, her heart pounding. Holt approached, his face unreadable. He stopped in front of her, and for a long moment, just looked at her. Then he extended his hand. That's the second longest confirmed training shot in this facility's history. The longest was 2,600 meters, made by a Delta operator with 10 years of combat experience. You just came within 113 meters of that record. Riley shook his hand, trying to process what had just happened. The brigadier general stepped forward, a tall man with silver hair and more ribbons on his chest than Riley could count. "Corporal Ashford, I'm General Bradley Thornton. I've been running special operations training programs for 15 years. What you just did?" He shook his head. "That was extraordinary." "Thank you, sir. How long have you been shooting?" "Since I was 8, sir. My father taught me." Thornton nodded thoughtfully. "Would you be interested in attending a selection course for an advanced marksmanship unit? We're building a new counterterrorism precision team, and we need shooters with your capability." Riley's mind raced. This was it, the door she'd been trying to open since she'd enlisted. "Sir, yes, sir, I'd be honored." As the brass returned to their discussions, Riley caught sight of Drake standing at the edge of the range, watching. His expression was complex. Anger, yes, but also something else. Respect, maybe. Or at least the grudging acknowledgement that what he'd just witnessed wasn't luck, wasn't politics, wasn't anything except pure, undeniable skill. Later, as she cleaned the Barrett under the setting sun, Odom sat down beside her. "You know they're going to talk about today for years, right? The female corporal who made a 2,500-meter shot on her first attempt." Riley shrugged. "Let them talk. I just did what I was trained to do." "No," Odom said quietly. "You did what you were born to do. There's a difference." That night, lying in her bunk, Riley finally allowed herself to feel the magnitude of what had happened. She'd taken a shot that most snipers never even attempted. She'd done it under pressure, in front of generals, with her entire future riding on a single trigger pull. And she'd made it. She texted Mason, "Hit a target at 2,500 meters today. Dad would have loved it." The response came quickly. "He's watching. I know he is. Proud of you, sis." Riley closed her eyes, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Benning, she slept peacefully. The helicopter descended through morning fog, its rotors thumping a rhythmic pulse that Riley felt in her chest. Through the window, she glimpsed mountains covered in dense forest, a river snaking through the valley, and what looked like a military compound carved into the wilderness. "Welcome to Ghost Mountain," the crew chief shouted over the engine noise. "Home of the most elite marksmen in the U.S. military. If you make it through selection, you'll be part of something that doesn't officially exist." The compound was smaller than Fort Benning, but far more intense. 20 candidates, all drawn from special operations units, all with combat experience. And now Riley, the only woman, the only one without combat deployments, the only one who'd arrived based on a single training shot. The selection cadre was led by a man known only as Reaper. No rank visible, no name tape, just cold eyes and a presence that made everyone stand straighter. He looked at Riley with the kind of assessment that went bone deep. "Corporal Ashford, you're here because General Thornton believes you have potential. I'm here to determine if he's right or if he's become sentimental in his old age." His voice was desert dry, without inflection. "This isn't sniper school. This is the place where good snipers come to become legends or wash out completely. There's no middle ground." The first week was psychological warfare disguised as training. Sleep deprivation, stress positions, scenarios designed to induce panic or rage. Shooting tests that seemed impossible by design, targets the size of dinner plates at 2,500 meters in high wind, or pop-up targets appearing for less than 3 seconds. Riley struggled. Her physical conditioning, while good, wasn't at the level of operators who'd spent years in special forces. During a ruck march with 80 pounds of gear, she fell behind, her legs burning, her lungs screaming. One of the other candidates, a Green Beret named Sawyer, slowed to match her pace. "Keep moving," he said quietly. "They're testing your breaking point. Don't give them one." She made it to the finish line, 15 minutes behind the lead group, but ahead of 3 others who'd quit halfway through. But where Riley shone was in the actual craft of precision shooting. During a night stalking exercise, crawling 800 meters through muddy terrain to reach a shooting position undetected, she made it to within 50 meters of the observation post without being spotted. Her subsequent shot, taken from an unsupported prone position at 900 meters, hit center mass on the first round. "Impressive fieldcraft," Reaper noted in his evaluation. "Natural patience, doesn't force the shot." By week 3, the original 20 candidates had been reduced to 12. 4 had quit, 3 had failed physical requirements, 1 had been removed for a training violation. And then came the announcement that would change everything. The challenge Reaper gathered the remaining candidates in the briefing room. Behind him, a topographic map showed a mountain range with a deep valley system. "Final evaluation," he said without preamble. 7 days from now, you'll each attempt what we call the ghost shot. It's a 3,300-meter engagement, just over 2 miles, from an elevated position to a valley target. Weather conditions will be monitored but not controlled. You'll have spotting support, but the final calculations and execution are yours alone. Silence filled the room. 3,300 meters was beyond the effective range of most sniper systems. It was the realm of world records and statistical flukes. Only 3 shooters have successfully completed the ghost shot in this program's 12-year history, Reaper continued. One was a SEAL with 19 years of service. One was a Marine Scout sniper who'd made over 40 combat kills. The third, he paused. The third was Sergeant First Class Sarah Chen. Some of you may have heard of her. She's currently operating with a classified unit and is considered one of the deadliest snipers in American history. Riley felt her pulse quicken. Chen, the woman Sergeant Holt had mentioned, the one who'd proven it could be done. The ghost shot isn't mandatory for graduation, Reaper said. You can opt out and still pass this course based on your other evaluations, but those who attempt it and succeed, they become part of a very small, very elite group. After the briefing, Riley walked the compound grounds, her mind churning. The rational part of her knew she should opt out. She'd already proven enough. Why risk everything on a shot that bordered on impossible? But another voice, her father's voice, whispered differently. You don't walk away from the hard shots. That's when you find out who you really are. Preparation. For the next 6 days, Riley lived and breathed preparation. She studied weather patterns for the region. She practiced breathing exercises until she could lower her heart rate to 40 beats per minute. She dry-fired thousands of repetitions, ingraining the trigger pull into muscle memory so deep it became autonomic. The rifle selected for the ghost shot was a custom-built bolt-action system chambered in .416 Barrett, a round specifically designed for extreme long-range shooting. The ballistics were exotic, a 452-grain bullet leaving the muzzle at 3,000 feet per second, carrying enough energy to remain supersonic past 2,000 meters. Sawyer, who'd become something of an ally, helped her run calculations. At 3,300 meters, your bullet drop is going to be around 1,600 inches. That's over 130 feet. You're essentially arcing the bullet like artillery. What about wind? That's the real killer. If you got a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind, you're looking at drift over 200 inches, more than 16 feet. And the wind won't be consistent from your position to the target. You'll have valley effects, thermal currents, altitude changes. Riley nodded, absorbing it all. So basically, it's impossible. Sawyer grinned. Basically, but Sarah Chen did it. If she can, maybe you can too. The night before the attempt, Riley couldn't sleep. She walked to the compound's small chapel, a simple wooden structure that served all faiths, and sat in the silence. She wasn't particularly religious, but she needed something. A moment of clarity. A connection to something larger than herself. Dad, she whispered into the darkness. I need your help tomorrow. I need your calm, your certainty. Help me see the shot. The day dawn broke cold and clear over Ghost Mountain. Riley reported to the equipment shed at 0530 hours, where Reaper and her assigned spotter, a grizzled operator named Ford, were waiting. Weather update, Ford said, reading from a tablet. Visibility excellent. Winds at the shooting position are currently 6 miles per hour from the northwest. Valley winds are variable, ranging 8 to 12 from the west. Barometric pressure stable. Temperature 48 degrees, rising to approximately 60 by mid-morning. Optimal window is between 0700 and 0900 hours. They drove in silence to the shooting position, a rocky outcrop 200 meters above the valley floor. The view was spectacular. Endless mountains layered in shades of blue and gray, the valley spread out below like a wrinkled green carpet, and far in the distance, barely visible even through binoculars, a small clearing where the target had been placed. Riley set up methodically, bipod legs extended and locked, rear bag positioned for stability, rifle laid into the support, barrel pointed downrange. She settled behind the scope, adjusting the cheek rest until her eye alignment was perfect. Through the optic, she could just make out the target, a bright orange steel plate, 4 feet square. At this distance, it appeared as a tiny speck of color against the green. Range is 3,287 meters, Ford confirmed, reading from the laser rangefinder. Close enough to call it 3,300. Angle of declination is negative 18 degrees. Wind at our position northwest at 7, gusting to 9. Downrange winds, harder to read. I'm seeing flag movement suggesting west at 10, but those valley thermals are going to create turbulence. Riley pulled out her data book and began calculations. Elevation, windage, Coriolis effect, spin drift, altitude compensation. The numbers filled the page, each one critical, each one a potential source of failure. Scope adjustment, she finally said. Elevation up 52 MOA. Windage right 8 MOA. Ford double-checked her math. That's aggressive on the windage. The thermals will push left. I'm compensating. Your call. Riley made the adjustments, each click of the turret precise and deliberate. She settled back into position, controlling her breathing, finding that quiet space where nothing existed except her, the rifle, and the distant target. Through the scope, she watched the wind indicators, trees swaying, grass rippling, dust patterns on the rocky slopes. The wind wasn't stable. It pulsed and shifted, breathing like a living thing. This is where most people fail, she thought. They wait for perfect conditions, but perfect never comes. You have to find the moment that's good enough and trust yourself to bridge the gap. Minutes passed. Ford said nothing, understanding that this was Riley's shot, her decision, her moment. Then Riley saw it, a lull, not windless, but consistent. A window maybe 10 seconds wide. Sending, she whispered. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the reticle, the target, and the space between heartbeats. She squeezed. The rifle roared. The scope jumped with recoil, knocking her eye back from the optic. But in that fraction of a second before she lost sight picture, she saw the vapor trail, a white line cutting through the morning air, arcing high before beginning its long descent. 4 seconds, 5, 6. The seconds stretched like hours. Riley held her breath, her body frozen. 7 seconds, and then, distant, almost dreamlike, the sharp clang of metal on metal echoed up from the valley. "Hit!" Ford screamed. "Dead center! Holy fucking shit! You hit it!" Riley safetied the rifle and sat up, her entire body shaking. For a moment, she couldn't process what had just happened. The mathematics of the shot were absurd. A bullet traveling more than 2 miles, dropping over 100 feet, pushed sideways by wind, affected by the Earth's rotation, and she'd put its center mass on the first attempt. Ford was on the radio, confirming the hit with observers at the target location. Confirmed impact, center mass, first round. Repeat, Corporal Ashford has successfully completed the ghost shot. From somewhere behind them, other candidates who'd been watching through spotting scopes erupted in cheers. Even those who'd been skeptical, who doubted whether she belonged here, couldn't deny what they'd just witnessed. Reaper approached, his expression unreadable as always. He looked at Riley for a long moment, then did something she'd never seen him do before. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the Ghosts," he said quietly. "You've earned it." That evening, compound mess hall. The celebration was subdued but genuine. The remaining candidates gathered around Riley, asking questions, wanting to understand how she'd made a shot that seemed to defy physics. "I don't know how to explain it," she said honestly. "Everything I've learned, everything my father taught me, everything I've practiced, it all came together in that moment. But honestly, I think I got lucky with the wind window." "Luck?" Sawyer laughed. "Riley, the wind is always variable. You read it better than anyone I've ever seen. That's not luck, that's skill." Later, away from the others, Reaper pulled her aside. "General Thornton wants to see you tomorrow. There's a position opening up in a joint task force. Highly classified, high-priority targets, operating in denied areas. They need precision shooters who can think independently and perform under extreme pressure." "I'm interested," Riley said without hesitation. "I thought you might be." He paused, something almost human crossing his face. "For what it's worth, when I first saw your file, I thought Thornton was making a mistake. I thought you were too inexperienced, too young. I was wrong. You're one of the most naturally gifted marksmen I've encountered in 20 years of doing this. Don't waste that gift." 2 months later, undisclosed location. Riley stood on a rooftop in a city she couldn't name, scanning through her scope across an urban landscape lit by streetlights and the occasional fire. Her spotter, a veteran Delta operator named Marcus, whispered coordinates into her ear. "Target is in the 3rd floor window, east side. Range 2100 meters. Wind negligible. You're clear to engage." Through the scope, Riley saw him, A man intelligence had confirmed was planning an attack that would kill dozens of civilians. No uniform, no army, just a terrorist with a detonator. She controlled her breathing, found the space between heartbeats, and squeezed. The man dropped. "Confirmed kill," Marcus said calmly. "Target neutralized. Let's move." As they broke down their position and prepared to exfiltrate, Riley felt the weight of what she'd just done. This wasn't a steel plate at 300 meters. This wasn't a training exercise or a demonstration shot. This was real, a life ended, civilians saved, the kind of decision that would haunt her and define her in equal measure. But she'd made the shot, because she'd trained for it, because she was ready for it, because somewhere along the way, she'd become exactly what she'd promised Sergeant Holt she would be. Not equal, but exceptional. 6 months after Ghost Mountain Arlington National Cemetery, Riley stood at her father's grave, wearing her dress uniform with ribbons she couldn't explain and decorations she couldn't publicly acknowledge. The autumn wind rustled through the trees, carrying leaves across the manicured grass. "I did it, Dad," she said quietly. "The ghost shot. The longest training shot in the program's history, actually. They remeasured it at 3,212 meters. Beat Sarah Chen's record by 7 meters. A squirrel chattered from a nearby tree. A jet passed overhead, probably heading to Reagan National. I've made real shots now, too. Can't tell you about them, obviously. But you'd be proud. I'm using everything you taught me. Patience, discipline, respect for the weapon and the mission." She placed a hand on the headstone, polished granite with his name, rank, and dates of service. "They asked me to speak at the next sniper school graduation. Me, the girl who everyone said didn't belong there. I'm going to tell them what you always told me, that shooting isn't about power or dominance. It's about service, about being willing to carry a burden that most people can't even imagine." Mason had offered to come with her, but she'd wanted this moment alone. Just her and Dad, the way it had been all those mornings on the ranch. Tin cans lined up on the fence, the Montana wind in their faces. "I miss you," she whispered, "every day. But I'm living the life you wanted for me. The life you said I was capable of." She saluted, crisp, perfect, held for 3 seconds, then turned and walked back through the cemetery, past row after row of white stones marking those who'd served, who'd sacrificed, who'd become part of something larger than themselves. She was one of them now. Not because of her gender, not despite it, but because she'd proven, shot after impossible shot, that excellence had no prerequisites except dedication, skill, and the courage to attempt what others declared impossible. As she reached her car, her phone buzzed. A message from Reaper. "New mission briefing. Wheels up in 48 hours. Bring your rifle." Riley smiled. The ghost shot had opened a door, but it was just the beginning. There would be other shots, other missions, other moments where she'd have to prove herself all over again. But she was ready. She'd always been ready.